I lost my seat in the last general election, and I was reminded a number of times in the months after that by people who told me I spent too much time talking about travellers. And that's the kind of attitude you get in Irish society. And the Irish education system reflects the state. It reflects the value of the state. It reflects who we are. But far too long in this country, the Irish education system has been for a certain section of society, possibly a majority of society, and everybody else had to kind of fit into it. And it wasn't for them. I taught in a particularly disadvantaged school, and the system and the history and the geography and the maths book and the Irish book didn't really reflect their experiences at all. These weren't Irish dancing children. These are children who liked disco dance. They didn't play Gaelic, they played soccer. Their history was flats, tuberculosis, lockouts, dock work, leaving school at 14. That was their history, as valid as anybody else, as any other history, as valid as the history of Tillamook or Peg. This was their Ireland. That was what they knew to be true. But the history book didn't necessarily reflect that. And it felt almost as if you're trying to squeeze children to understand maybe an official Ireland, and also that official Ireland doesn't necessarily respect them or understand them or even recognise them. So I wonder, if we don't accept this bill in its entirety, not just the spirit but in its entirety, how can we begin to imagine an education system that will embrace the African Irish community, the Polish Irish community, the Lithuanian Irish community, the Brazilian Irish community? How can we begin to imagine an education system that will embrace and love and empower all those communities if we can't do it for the indigenous travelling community in Ireland? Now, Senator McLaughlin has spoken about this passionately over a number of years. The work of the civil engagement group of Senator Kelleher and others has been transformational in these houses to get people of different political backgrounds to come to an understanding of the necessity to move beyond where we always have been. Senator McLaughlin has talked about the itinerary report of the early 60s, which speaks of always with the travelling issue being a problem that needs to be solved, a problem that needs to be assimilated into what is normal, as opposed to recognising what is right and what is just and what is decent and what has an absolute right to exist, an absolute right to be celebrated. And that was the whole argument about ethnicity. Celebration of a people. And you think you're getting somewhere, and it was passed by this government, and there's a level of celebration about that. And then an individual runs for the presidency and completely, willfully misunderstands what ethnicity was all about and gets 24% of the public vote. And you wonder if a child has never had a settled child, has never had an interaction with a traveller child, never had an interaction with a traveller family, where are they going to get their information from? The media? Politics? Like, God help us if we're expecting a child from the settled tradition to get any understanding of what travelling tradition is like, if we're expecting them to learn from contemporary society, from media, from politics, from community, from the society and where they live. Because if that's their only avenue for understanding, they're going to just learn the prejudices and the racism and the willful misunderstanding that I grew up with, that most settled people grew up with. So if the state does not take it upon itself, not as a concession, not as a, sure, look it, not as a concession, but as a vindication of a right, of a people, that they are an intrinsic part of this nation, not something to be sort of, for concessions to be allowed to. And that's the whole mind shift change that every department needs to have. This isn't a problem. This isn't something that we have to facilitate. We don't have to talk about tolerance. People don't need to be tolerated. It needs to be an absolute intrinsic understanding in this nation of ours of the basic humanity of the existence of a community. And whether you're from a flat complex in inner city Dublin, or from the travelling community and living in a Hawthing site, or you're from the place that seems to write all the history books in official Ireland, you have as much of a right to your history and to your tradition. Everybody on this island has the same right to the history and tradition of the entirety of the nation. So what we have done is we have relegated identities. We have relegated them and we have promoted others. And that makes somebody from one of those relegated identities feel that the education system is not theirs. It doesn't celebrate them. It doesn't believe in them. It makes you feel as if I'm going to get anywhere in this life as a traveller, I have to pretend to be settled. Because then I get somewhere. Because that's what the history book is telling me about. That the people who have led this country or have performed greatly in this country, who are there to be celebrated, just aren't like me. So I have to change. And that's a devastating message for an 8, 9, 10-year-old, 11-year-old traveller child to learn, is that if you're going to get anywhere in life, you're going to have to be just a little less traveller. Now, I don't know, parents in this country who look at their children and realise that if they're going to have to get somewhere, they have to be a little bit different than what they are, than what I have passed down to them, than what I'm raising them to be. They have to be a little bit less that to be accepted. Well, you know, we can't control all of that, as has been said. We can't control all of that. We can't control the prejudices that people of a certain generation have, mine and older. We can't control that necessarily. But what we can do in our education system is to control at least an element of that. And, you know, for us to consider this bill as a concession to lobbying, I think is a massive mistake. I think the Department of Education should be tripping over themselves to congratulate Senator Kelleher and the Civil Engagement Group and other senators in this House and deputies in the other House for wanting to promote this. It reflects well on this Oireachtas that this is being promoted, that this is being asked for, that this is being demanded. So, Minister, what I would suggest to you is that, you know, the hearts of 9-year-olds are easily broken. You know, they're easily broken. It's pretty devastating to learn that you're just not important enough because of who you are. And we're in, like, you know, we're in Aodhán this morning. They'll rebuild that school, and the school will be, you know, be fixed. And in years to come, it'll be a bad memory, but the community will get together again, and it'll be okay because there's enough love in that area. But if you're a 9-year-old and you discover that because you're a traveller and because of the textbooks in front of you and everything around you in your school is telling you that you're just really, you're going to have to change a little bit if you're going to get on this life, because there's nothing really worth celebrating about you. And everything that you ask for is a concession from what really is the mainstream because you're not mainstream. That's a heartbreaking realisation to come to terms with. And I wouldn't want any child to come to that realisation. So I suppose, Minister, it is a lot about emotion, and it's a lot about the beating heart and about identity, and that can be difficult to put into hard legalistic text. And I know the department hates legislation. I know for years it was circulars that they lived by, and that's how they got by, and that's fine. But this is hard legislation trying to underpin the identity rights of a people, a part of our nation. And I repeat to you again, Minister, if young children of this nation do not learn from their school, their state-funded school, the organ of the state, about traveller culture, traveller heritage, the celebration of traveller life, where else are they going to hear it? So with that, the Labour Party group absolutely support the bill. We'll work with others to get this over the line. And again, appeal to you, Minister, to appeal to if I might say, the better part of yourself, because you are a progressive minister. You do believe in the right things in terms of education. And I know in the cold light of day you can improve upon, I think, the amendments that you've put down and make this something that we can all be proud of.
Thank you, Senator.